Let's see. This is
One of you.
things taken.
No.
Social.
Yeah.
Roll call.
Janine Miller,
Here.
Dan Lombardi,
Here.
Carmel Angelo is absent, Ace Barrett,
Here.
Josh Liberty is currently absent, Lloyd Weir,
Here.
Mark Myrtle,
Here.
Jed Diamond,
Here.
Shannon Riley,
Here.
Tom Allman is absent, Donna Muschetti.
Very good. Here.
So we have 2 months of minutes to peruse this morning. We haven't, or this afternoon, if you haven't read them already. We'll just take a moment.
Okay, you want to take the April ones first?
Okay. I will take them one.
Okay, I have a correction for the April minute. Under public comments, number 8, Chris Dyhoff, candidate for 5th District Supervisor.
Can you talk just a little louder, Jan, please?
Yes.
Thanks.
Under public comments, number 8, under Chris Skyhawk, candidate for 5th District Supervisor.
Yes?
It says spoke to the need to spread treatment funding. I think that should be spoke of the need to spread intervention services around to existing points of service to prevent escalation. Does it say escalation?
So this is the April,
This is April.
and under what heading, what number?
The first public expression.
Oh, under public, got it. Okay, thank you.
There are no more corrections.
Escalation, yeah. And then I had another correction under 10 for Wendy Roberts. And it says Wendy Roberts spoke on behalf of a friend. She actually spoke as a friend of a family with a bipolar son. And she spoke of the need for local crisis workers throughout the county who are readily available to intervene in crisis situations. And then in reference to Howard Hospital as a mental health facility, she supports repurposing buildings. And it says she's deeply saddened that people don't want clients treated in our county. I think she said she's deeply saddened that people perpetuate stigma against mental illness and fear-based rejection of needed mental health facilities. She asked for compassion and fact-based decision-making.
And I have your edits.
It's the same thing.
Donna?
And then there's just one more correction on page 4, paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It should be Mr. Kemper, no B in his name. Kemper.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Do we have a motion to approve the April minutes?
So moved.
As amended?
That's amended. Yeah.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So that passes, and shall we move on to the May minutes? Donna, yes.
Page 2, last paragraph, last line. It should be because we, not because with. Page 3, paragraph 6. It should be each member as to what outcomes they want, not the.
What's the second one?
Page 3, paragraph 6. Chair Alman posed each member as to each member as to what outcomes they. It should be they want. Page 5, paragraph 3, my comment should read spectrum of care needs to be all-inclusive. All-inclusive means preventative, at need, aftercare, etc. And I'm not sure about anybody else's statements. Page 8, paragraph 8 should be the sheriff met with the governor last week.
Somebody like to move to approve the minutes?
I'll move to approve as amended.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? All right, would anybody like to put forth some public expression on non-agendized items?
Is an agenda available to look at?
It's on the back table.
Is it? Sorry.
There's also a sign-in sheet there.
All right. Shall we move on to discussion? And the first item is Lloyd's report.
Yes. I do have something to report this evening. Yesterday, we received our first installment of Measure B sales tax revenues from the state. The total was $517,059.09. And that's 1 month's worth that we've received so far. So those funds are been deposited into a separate fund in the county's finance system and will be kept for its entirety in that fund, and expenditures of those funds will be recommended and approved by the Board of Supervisors. So no expenditures yet, we just have our first deposit.
Amazing.
It's finally here.
Ms. Riley?
Could you express whether that's roughly on par with what we projected, or?
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay.
I'm gonna need a few more months to kind of, to measure it, but that's pretty good for the first month. And yeah, I'm thinking that's gonna be about right, but I will keep you appraised of any changes. I'll give you a projection too.
Right.
That's it, thanks.
Okay. Any public expression on the first item? Seeing none, and I guess stepping up initiative is going to be continued until Carmel Angelo is here.
Well, I'd like to say something about stepping up.
Sure.
Okay. So, the Stepping Up Initiative is an initiative to defer people with mental illness from being incarcerated in jails. And I think it'd be really good for our board to be educated on it. The Behavioral Health Advisory Board has been promoting this for quite a while, and Mendocino County was the first county in California to pass a resolution to support this initiative. I tracked down a copy of the resolution, and I hope that you guys would have a copy of it by next meeting. Do you want me to give you a copy of it? Okay. And also, there was a conference in January of 2017 that a group of people from our county attended. And there was a document passed out, the 6 questions that communities leaders need to ask, which should also be in the packet for your information. But there's a website that I suggest that people on this board go to between now and then to educate yourselves.
Did you say it's in this packet that we have? Or?
No, it's not.
Got
I'm
it.
suggesting it be in the next
Got
month's
it.
packet when we can discuss it with some, background. What is that website? So I'll get you copies of this, Dora, to put in. I think it's Step Up Together is the website. If you Google Stepping Up, you'll find it. On those 6 questions, there were webinars on each of them where they had a national panel discuss it. which is really interesting, and now they have some scholarly documents also to refer to those different categories.
Is this a state initiative? or
It's a
what?
national initiative.
National, I got it.
Yeah, and it has a number of sponsors, including the National Association of County, the Council of State Governments Justice Center, NAMI, the National NAMI, National Association of State Mental Health Program Directors, the National Sheriff's Association, and there's a lot of them. Also, they're starting a new webinar series this year on to help collect data, which is one of the objectives to help achieve this initiative, is collect data. So I would just suggest that you look into that so we're prepared for the next
Yeah,
meeting.
great, thanks.
Any public comment regarding the Stepping Up initiative? Next item on the agenda, update on contract and detailed scope of work for Lee Kemper needs assessment, and that's also Carmel Angelo.
Actually,
I'm sorry? Oh, do I?
it's gonna be Janine Miller.
Oh, Janine, okay, I'm sorry. Janine?
So everyone has their copy of the contract that was submitted to the Board of Supervisors and approved by the Board of Supervisors at their last board meeting on June 19th, I believe it was. So if there are any questions with that, I'm happy to answer that. Yeah,
Who composed the definition of services?
I'm not able to answer that.
Okay. That's pages 14 and 15.
That wasn't us, that was probably board staff.
Board staff done.
CEOs.
That wasn't on their consent calendar, was it?
This was on the,
The
Yeah.
Exhibit A
Yes.
was on their consent calendar?
yes, the whole contract was on consent.
Oh, okay. Do we know if he accepted it?
Mr. Kemper? I believe.
Any other comment regarding the contract?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes.
Question. I see the terms of the agreement are to begin March 1st, 2018, and continue through December 31st, 2018. So for me, it crosses fiscal years for the county, and maybe Janine, if we could just, has he done any work so far in the previous year? I'd like to get an invoice for that year versus a total invoice at the end or something, because I need to account for it by fiscal year. So.
And he has started
He's
working,
already started,
yeah, in
okay.
17, 18, so I will make sure that I let him know that you need an invoice
Yeah.
closing out
Yeah,
the
at the end of
fiscal
this
year.
week or something, yeah. That'd be great. That's all I have, thanks.
Donna, did you have something?
What? No.
Any other comments about the Kemper contract?
I'm not sure where, I have a question, whether it's under this item or the next one, the needs assessment progress report. I'm not sure what you're going to be covering under that one. They're both related, looks like, to the,
They're two separate items. The contract going to the board was the first one, just a report out.
right.
If they accepted it, if there was any questions. And then the second one is actually on the work being done.
Okay, that's where my question will come in.
All right.
Thanks.
Any public comment on the contract? All right, next is the needs assessment progress report with the discussion and possible action. I'm afraid I have the old agenda, so who's Janine?
I think that changed about last minute and not perfect.
Really?
Not even.
Janine?
All right, So I don't have as much of a progress report as I'd like to have prepared, but I know that Mr. Kemper has been working and meeting with local providers and a variety of other individuals. He's also been collecting data from Redwood Quality Management Company and County Behavioral Health to pull his report together. So I know that they're still working. Yes, he's interviewing clients and family members, and I think he's connected with Donna.
He has, and he still has more to contact, but he has been reaching out and talking to the contacts I've given him. He hasn't reached everybody, and we're gonna work on that, make sure that he does. So I will be emailing him in the next week to see who he has talked to and who he hasn't. I do know that he's talked to at least one client and 2 family members. So he still has a couple other clients to talk to and another family member that I'm not positive whether he has or has not. So.
Are you finished with?
Yes.
Okay. Derek, may I ask a question? Thank you. So this board had been asked to submit questions to be addressed by Kemper report, which we did. And I want to refer to the April minutes, which is where under attachment A in the back of that. I had a number of questions that I thought might be answered by you. In other words, I thought maybe we already knew these questions. And I've been asked by people in the community the answers to the first 4. So I want to just direct your attention to those and what people wanted to know, particularly if we know this now before we get the Kemper report. The first one was the number of people who have been put on a 5150 hold in Mendocino County as a danger to themselves, a danger to others, or gravely disabled. So how do we know how many people currently have been doing under those categories? Second, the percentage of the total in each of the 3 categories, a danger to themselves, to a danger to others, or gravely disabled. A number of people want to know, in a sense, what's the nature of the people we're talking about and at what level of danger are some of these people. So if we know that, I'd like to know. And then third, the number of people in these categories who have these problems and need services and treatment but aren't receiving them. That is, people who've been seen in the jail, emergency rooms, and so on, that really are being seen but not in the best possible place. And then 4, the number of people who are presently being sent out of county to other facilities, since there are not adequate facilities available in Mendocino County. So I wondered, is that information you have through your department, or is that information that Mr. Kemper is going to be gathering that we don't know already?
He'll be gathering some of that information. The 1, 2, and 4 we readily have available, depending on whether you wanted it for a month look, a year look, couple years look. Redwood Quality Management and the county regularly update the Behavioral Health Board, the Behavioral Health Advisory Board monthly with the number of 5150s, their categories. So we do monthly reports both for the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, and then obviously we have reports that go to the state. So those 3 areas, those 3 questions specifically is data we have on hand and we could provide easily.
Could I get a copy? I'd be interested, and I think the people at least that have been asking me would be interested in current recent data, so the last couple of months, then year, and 2 years if you have that. I think that would kind of give people an idea of what we're already seeing. So if you can
Sure.
send that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll pull it for you, and then we'll be actually doing a board presentation on July 10th, and it'll have some of the statistics in there too. But
Okay.
so what would you like to see?
Well, if you have of the 4, any of those 4 questions, that's what people are.
What period of time are you?
Well, the last few months, and then 1 year and 2 years, if you have that data. I think that would be helpful.
So that information is usually in the Behavioral Health Advisory Board's packet, which is available online.
I looked and I couldn't find exactly that information, so
It would
maybe.
be under the RQMC report.
Okay, well, if you could send me where I can stay up to date on it as well, where I could let other people know exactly what the URL is to pass it on, that would be great. Good, thanks.
Any other comments about this? Yes, there's another one.
Janine, have we appointed a liaison to communicate directly with Lee from our committee? Does anyone know that question? Is there someone appointed from our committee to communicate? I think that would be wise for us to do. And then we can maybe have some dialogue while this is being created.
Great idea.
Yeah. Who would be best?
Well, Donna's already communicated.
No, I think not.
Um,
Are you volunteering?
I don't think I'm the best qualified to be that person, but I think one of us should, kind of direct what the committee wants and make sure they're going down that path.
Would you like to make a motion?
I'd like a volunteer before I make a motion.
Well, I would be I've corresponded with him, so I'm interested in, if I'm understanding it, what that would be somebody appointed by this committee that would potentially gather questions that the whole group might have, or individuals that would pass it on to Mr. Kemper and then get feedback from him about kind of where those questions are,
Yes.
if they're,
And
where they are in his process.
Where he is in his
Yeah.
process, and we're guiding him to what
Yeah.
we want.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that if that were the desire of the committee as a whole.
We need to be a little bit careful of Brown Act violations probably and not conduct a serial meeting inadvertently.
Exactly, well, you'd have to remind,
Right.
to be sure, but yeah, I mean, I would have to be, or any of us, whoever would do that would have to be.
It's okay to feed him questions as long as it's not on a reply chain.
And it's not a conversation involving a majority of the
Right.
board. Right.
Just less than 6 people a month, right?
That would, yeah, I would think, yeah,
Yeah, that we're not providing direction that hasn't been
Yeah,
considered
publicly.
publicly and by the full board.
Well, I think
And
the
if
intent
that-
would be to be able to have some dialogue from here
Yes.
with him, and yeah, we'd have to be sure that we're not,
Changing
Changing.
the scope of work, but
Yeah.
maybe guiding some questions that you could bring to the board.
Yeah. Would you like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I make a motion that we nominate Jed to be our liaison and communicate directly with Lee and update us monthly on the process.
Second? All in favor? All right, opposed? Motion carries. Any public comment regarding needs assessment? All right, next is the City of Willits Resolution 2018-30. Mark, is it?
Sure. So I was forwarded this resolution by the supervisor, the District 4 supervisor, which I forwarded on to the Measure B committee. And it's a 4-page document. I've summarized it here shortly. Basically, the way Willits City Council has passed a resolution which basically doesn't support a 32-bed acute psychiatric hospital. Not sure where that information came from, but that's what was written in the report. Resolution. They cited California codes, seismic safety, fire codes, proximity to schools, Supreme Court rulings, etc. Basically, not in support of the use of that site. The Willits City Council wants the Board of Supervisors to receive due notice and the right to participate in the evaluation and approval of the Willits Hospital project. County acknowledge that the city fire, safety, zoning, and building ordinances and city general land use authority considered. County will perform a detailed study on financial feasibility of the facility, provide a detailed study to the potential effects and impacts to the businesses and residents of the city of Willits, provide records concerning agreements, plans, proposals, letters of intent, or records concerning use of Measure B funds for such purpose, citing the government code. In summary, we have a fight to use the old hospital site for 14-bed Huff unit. That's my assessment.
Any other comments? Yes.
Well, I guess I'd like to say, since I'm here representing the city of Ukiah, that to the city of Willits, I get it. As the county seat, we are home to the majority of the services in the county, and that is not without its impacts. We learned about the proposed RCS Crisis Center on Orchard Avenue by reading it in the newspaper. So I totally understand where this is coming from and appreciate the concerns of the community. And so as a board, I hope that we will be sensitive to that as we move forward, particularly since we're considering putting locations in multiple, facilities in multiple locations, that we make a concerted effort to keep those jurisdictions apprised. We can be forwarding them agendas, and I'm not sure if that's automatically happening, but I think at the very least, the administration and or city councils of each jurisdiction should receive notification of our agendas and discussion items. I know that these are public meetings and that anyone can go to the county's website and watch the videos and see the agendas, but for busy people, taking that kind of proactive step to stay that involved is unlikely to happen. And so I'd like to see us take extra measures if necessary to make sure that we are informing the other jurisdictions of our discussions.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'll make a comment as well, just as the representative from the 3rd District, which is part of Willett. I agree with what you're saying. I think anything that happens as a result of the work with the committee and recommending to the board, it needs to have the support of the community. I mean, the reason that Measure A passed was that there was a great deal of support from the entire community. But, as it said, the devil's in the details, and the glory's in the details. Actually translating a general proposal or a proposition to actually implementing it is really critical. And then having, input, dialogue, I don't think everybody's going to agree with everything from everywhere, but everybody who's interested, which I think should be everybody, should be on the same page with the information. And I think and I speak for myself and I think for the committee, and what you're saying is, want to be as open, transparent, available as we can. I've offered to come to the city council meetings regularly after this meeting, since it will be an immediate response. And obviously there's a lot of people in the audience, have been for most of these meetings from Willits, which for me as a representative, that's really valuable, because I don't feel like I'm, just the lone wolf and nobody is out there and knows what we're doing. So I'm really excited to continue the dialogue and to be sure that as much of the concerns that people have are heard, that accurate information is put out and received, and that we're open, and I'm open to any input, any dialogue, and I'll certainly do my best to be as responsive as I possibly can. And I think the entire committee that we're all part of, want to do that. So I'm definitely excited to be working with everybody now as this is the first report where we actually hear that money's here, which is both heartening and it's also, when money's involved, then it has a new meaning. And when a decision's going to be made about a particular facility in a particular place, it's going to make it very real. And I think that makes it even more important that before we get to these crucial decisions, that there be, hopefully a degree of trust and openness that we know we're working together. So I want to do that.
Yes, I'm sorry. Shannon.
Well, I'm kind of confused because in the introduction of this resolution, it says the County of Mendocino proposes to acquire and use Howard Memorial Hospital, and I'm not aware that there was a proposal that was made, that there was any kind of decision. I know that it was something that was being considered, and also a licensed 32-bed acute psychiatric hospital. In the presentation that was made before, it wasn't a 32-bed facility. So, I agree with Jed that transparency and openness is really important, and I know that's something that our behavioral health board has struggled with, is to get information before decisions are made. But I think that there's a lot of worry here that things have happened that haven't happened. And I also think that we should be considering and looking at a number of different locations and facilities, not just focusing upon Howard Hospital. And I don't know if we want to appoint an ad hoc committee of this group to go around and look at different things, that could possibly be it. But, I'm kind of concerned that this reveals a lot of stigma that's unnecessary.
Any other comments about, yes, Mark?
A comment that's disturbing to me is that there's some false interpretations that are happening, and I think that placing this document out is basically saying not in my hometown, and I think every city in our county would probably want to say that, and I don't think that's fair. So I do think that we need to get out and we need to communicate what we are trying to do, and I'm not saying that I think it's way too early to say that we're selecting a place to do a pup unit. We don't even know if we can afford one. And so I think we do need to communicate that we're out here to make mental health services better any way that we can possible. We're identifying the needs, and we're going to use that money as wisely as we possibly can and make mental health services better. But I think we do need to communicate, and I'm doing myself to get out and communicate with all the stakeholders and the citizens about what we're trying to do. So I think going to the city council meetings and discussing this is probably a pretty good idea. So we can maybe head off these type of resolutions in all of our cities.
Any further questions?
Yeah, I just to piggyback on that, just a couple of other comments. I've been working in mental health for almost 50 years, and I've been working with a lot of the people who are being sent out of county for 17 years. I've been part of county public guardian's office that does the evaluations. And when we first started, this committee was appointed in January and we had our first meetings, one of the first issues that was discussed was a needs assessment that I think all of us said before we can even have an idea of what we want, we need to have an idea of what's here, what's needed, all the things that Mark mentioned. And took a bit to organize that and then to get the Kemper group, and you've heard that part of the report. I think there was, in my mind, a part of our process that got out of order that's made it seem like the hospital was already being on the agenda for approval. And part of that, at least from my perspective, not being part of the ongoing mental health discussions, was that the hospital had been discussed as a possible use for a facility years ago, at least 2 or 3 years since the old hospital closed. And so those discussions continued, and we had a couple of meetings where the hospital was discussed. In my mind, and I know in some of your mind, you said, geez, a decision is about to be made. We've got to, in a sense, gear up right away. This is what we thought was going to happen immediately. And I think that's partly to speak for myself, we got, I think, that out of order. I would have wished that whole looking at the hospital would have happened after we had a needs assessment. So it happened, it's been discussed, it's been being discussed for 2 years. From my perspective as one of the members of the committee, I'm totally open to finding out first what we need. That's why we do a needs assessment. And then looking at what are the different options, where are the possibilities, before we ever decide anything about what facility or facilities would be the best. So even though it's certainly talked about, and it's been out there, and maybe that will be one of the possible facilities that will come out of the needs assessment, it certainly hasn't yet. And I speak for myself, and I think for the whole committee, in that our mind is still open. We haven't made any decisions, and I would hope citizenry and the city of Willits would also, in a sense, not get ahead of themselves in making decisions about what they do want or they don't want until we have a better idea of what the needs are. So that's the last thing I want to say, and I'll leave it for now and continue the dialogue. Hear from the community when you all are ready.
Mark?
There was a point that I think is well mentioned, and I think we should start this process sooner rather than later, is see the financial feasibility of supporting a PUF unit, because I have talked to people and they think a PUF unit is needed. And so that doesn't really cost us anything to put that out on a spreadsheet to see if we can afford the annual costs of maintaining a facility like that. Even if, that way, if it is a primary need that comes from Kemper, we can see if we can even afford it to run it every year. And one thing that was mentioned to me is that the highest paid position in the county is a psychiatrist that they can't fill. Is that true?
We have not been able to fill the psychiatrist position.
Yeah. So, and that's the highest paid position in the county. So if we could draft what kind of staff might be needed to do that, I would spend time to put it on a spreadsheet to see if we could see what the cost of running that facility might be or might look like. And then if it does come back as a needs assessment and it's the primary thing that we can afford, we may not be able to afford it on an ongoing basis. So.
You make an interesting point too that I just add to that assuming you needed a facility like that, you could afford a facility like that, and you knew what it would cost, there's a question of, could you staff it? Could you attract? And they just saying the psychiatrist position is not filled, I know a number of people have told me that I have some concerns about whether we could staff a facility. So that would be another part of, I think, what you're raising, am I right?
I think any position could be staffed, it's how much you have to pay to fill it. So we know that currently, the current position doesn't pay enough, otherwise it would be staffed.
Yes, Jen?
Well, this is something that I've been wondering about for a long time, and a PUF unit isn't the only type of psychiatric facility that there is. And so I've been asking, what are the different levels? What are the different staffing needs? And it's not just, it has to do with research, and perhaps that's something that'll come out of our needs assessment. But when we talk about staff, we need to know, obviously there's a need for psych techs, and so we need to talk to the college, can we get a program like that here? Because we need them already, right? And also, is it possible to get a residency program for psychiatrists? There's all of these different things, and I don't know if we should wait for the needs assessment, or, I know Janine is just buried in work. What do you have, 5 audits this month or something? So, and she's the person that would, have the knowledge to put something like this together, and I don't know if that's a fair thing to ask of her at this point.
I agree, but I think that's something that if we could outline what that kind of unit might need as far as personnel is concerned, I could do the research.
Yeah, I've looked online, and it's like pages and pages and pages. If you're good at,
Okay.
dissecting stuff and putting it into a one-page thing,
Well,
that'd be fantastic.
I'm looking at the money and the resources that it costs, because I come from a community that had a $22 million facility built for them that they couldn't keep the lights on. So they had to have the city partner with them. And I don't want to do that same thing here.
What was that?
CV Star, the CV Star Center.
The pool.
Yeah.
The
Pool's
pool.
a really good
The
example.
pool?
Yeah.
That's a really good example.
The city
Mr.
pool?
Vice Chair, are you going to ask for public input?
We are.
Input on this?
But that's not me.
Yes, Janine?
I have some documents that we have put together that may, I think, has like the staffing levels depending on the number of clients you have in a facility. I'd be happy to bring that up if you'd like to see that.
Yeah, if you could forward it, that would be great.
Any further comments on the committee? Okay, public comment, please. Anybody would like to take, yes?
Yes, I'm Gregory Sims. I've spoken before. Do I need to say who I am? Or yeah. I am a mental health educator, and I like the idea of a needs assessment that would take into account the various layers of psychological and educational needs. And I talked a little bit with Jed about this, that basically we have populations of individuals who we look at and we say, what we're going to be doing is supporting these people pretty much through the rest of their lives. That doesn't look like there's going to be a breakthrough. There are other people who've gotten kind of like a sort of the raw end of a deal, but they're kind of down and out right now, but they've got psychological and educational and social supports that will help them through and will be helping them just for a brief time. Then there's this, it's the triage model of population in the middle that could drift into chronic condition, or to move out of the acute phase that they're in, with, in addition to treatment, a kind of education that would help them reblend. It's like John Piaget talked about the formal operations in concrete operations and they got involved in drug addiction, etc., and they never really made the movement from just one thing after another in an educational system that was quite linear, that needed to be much broader and needed to be much more experiential with a considerable amount of curriculum base in addition to the open state that they really need for educational growth. And I think if your needs assessment is on the mark, it's going to take into account these various populations and the modes of education treatment and means through which we make progress, and to monitor the progress in an updated way pretty much on a month-by-month basis and with a lot of public input. I talked a bit to the behavioral board this last month, and I'm hoping to make a much fuller presentation to them or to you. And I asked Jed if we could possibly have an advisory committee for your committee made up of people who have been working in this area for many decades. And I'm not the only one who has a lot of ideas as to what the public has given us a mandate, and 83% of the people who voted said, we want you to do something. And so I knew I want to do it in a very organized way.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sims.
Hi there, I'm Jerry Gonzalez. I spoke before. I was the former police chief in Willits, and now I'm on the city council. And first of all, thank you for your service on this board. I really appreciate all the work you guys are doing. I'll tell you, Ms. Riley, like you, we found out there was this, it looked like heavy discussion. We found out about it from the newspaper. And we'd also found out that there was some discussion involving why your facility considered there in Ukiah wouldn't fly because it was near schools and stuff. And it felt like there was some discussions that were happening relevant the Howard facility without the city of Willits being at the table. So I toyed with the idea of whether or not to support that resolution, but I got to tell you, I did want to assert that we wanted a seat at the table if it came down to what sort of facility came there. Like most cities, we have to respond to our constituents and want to be in a position of being able to explain things and look at things. And we did, I guess some of the confusion may have come out of maybe some discussions here, but also there was some sort of contract or somebody that approached some of our city staff. I'm not sure if they were working for the hospital board or not, asking questions and insinuating, well, this could happen if you didn't do something. And so all of that kind of added to the confusion. I just want to point out that myself and Councilman Strancy will try and make these meetings, so in hopes of working with all of you, and it should, the Howard facility seriously be looked at some sort of facility. I'm glad that it looks like you're looking at a needs assessment, and because it kind of looked to us like maybe the cart was going before the horse, and nobody had bothered to get a hold of us, whether it was at the administrative level or not. So that was it. We just kind of wanted to throw something up and say, hey, we just kind of want to be involved, especially if it involves our community. So unless you have any questions, I just wanted that.
Thank you. Any further public comments? Needs assessment? I guess the resolution. So moving on to the monthly committee update to the Board of Supervisors at the first meeting. Any discussion? Not a lot of new information introduced this time. I guess we have Jed as liaison to Mr. Kemper. Any further issues that we want to present to the board? Yes.
Can we include, maybe this is a question for Dora, can we include some of the other jurisdictions on the agenda notifications?
Yes, I just need to email who I'm sending to,
Okay.
and then email addresses.
So, if it's okay with the committee, I'd be happy to reach out to each jurisdiction and find out who the appropriate contact people should be and provide that information.
That's
To
an
the
excellent
clerk.
idea. That is.
Thank you.
Hey, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I don't know if this is exactly tied into this, but will somebody from this board contact Mr. Kemper to let him know that the board has made a motion and that I was appointed so that we can start that process going? How does he get informed about that decision?
You call him and
I can call him and
Yep,
tell him.
you call him and you say, hi, Lee.
I've been appointed.
I've been appointed.
Okay, I can do that.
He's also,
I didn't want to overstep my often
also-
excitable bounds.
He's also receiving the minutes.
He gets the minutes too, well, good.
So I have a question about this item.
Yeah.
Was there some discussion that we were gonna report to the Board of Supervisors monthly? I don't remember that.
It came to me from the clerk of the board's office.
I'm
The
sorry.
clerk of the board's office,
Okay.
told me that we have a standing item now before the Board of Supervisors each month. So I put it on the agenda with the chair's permission, because I thought the committee should be deciding what they're updating the board with, and maybe more than one of you, or take turns presenting to the board with just one thought.
So we'll have a copy of the minutes just to remind us of what we talked about. Have there been representatives up to now?
Yes, the sheriff,
Sheriff,
right, and our next one is, I believe, July 7th,
10th, I think.
10th, maybe.
Do you know offhand, I know the sheriff is there for a number of reasons, but do you know offhand as to whether he's planning to be there on July 10th?
I do not.
Is there anybody in the committee that would like to volunteer to be representative?
I have to go to that meeting, so does Janine.
Okay, Jan or Janine? Janine, or would?
Was that no, not necessarily?
Are we selecting an alternate?
Me?
Are we selecting an alternate in the event that Sheriff Allman is not available? Should we assume that he would do the updates since he's?
Well, that's probably,
He's
well,
the chair, yeah.
he wasn't at this meeting though, I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, so maybe
Best time to vote.
for this particular meeting, Janine or Jan or both could do it.
If he's not there.
If he's, well, again, he wasn't at this meeting, so it'd probably be better to have somebody presenting that was here.
Oh, from this meeting?
Right. Just to update the progress of our committee.
Well, we can, I mean, you talked to him, right?
You would think I would see him later, but I do not.
So Jan, would you like to?
I'm not sure.
Okay.
It'll be a short presentation, there's not a lot to,
What's that?
I said it'll be a short presentation, there's not a lot to update them on.
Right.
The money.
The money, the concern for transparency and communication.
Do we need to have a vote on that? I think that's just direction. Committee member reports. Janine, would you like to start?
Sure. So in front of you, you guys have a paper in the door passed out that says Medi-Cal Special Mental Health Services. You guys had asked for a list of what the billable Medi-Cal Special Mental Health Services, so we went ahead and put that together for you guys. And if there's any questions, I can answer those at any time. It's a really brief definition, so there's actually more that goes with it, but it kind of gives you the gist of what the service is. Really important that all these services have to meet medical necessity, so we can't provide a service if you don't meet specific criteria, which is medical necessity, and have one of the specified diagnoses that qualifies for these services. The other, we are doing a presentation July 10th on mental health services in Mendocino County. So if anybody watches the Board of Soups meeting, you will be able to see that. There will be some information on the services we provide and some conservatorship stuff about in and out of county and stuff like that. So some statistics will be in there for people that are interested. And then just that I've been working with Lee's group and my staff on providing information that Lee needs.
Thank you, Jan?
Uh,
Oh, yes, sorry, Mark?
Are these linear? Is this what happens first, second, third, or
No.
so?
So what I can say is the first two, yes.
Okay.
So, but that's if you're getting into regular services, right? So if you walk into crisis, you're not gonna have an assessment and client plan done. You're gonna be assessed for crisis and possibly hospitalized. But when you look at Medi-Cal services, one, we have to have an assessment done first. So if you're just going into general outpatient services, you have to have an assessment that has a diagnosis that says you meet medical necessity. And not only do you have to have an assessment, you have to have an assessment that includes the criteria they require. So they have, I think, 9 criteria areas that you have to complete. And then you have to have a specific diagnosis that's within Title IX, and then you have to show that you meet medical necessity within your assessment and your diagnosis. Then you have to have a client plan. If you don't have a client plan, all the other services are not billable to Medi-Cal. Your client plan dictates what your diagnosis is and how those interventions will help you be able to maintain, right? So you have to have interventions that match your diagnosis, and then your interventions are provided within the rest of those services. If the intervention is not on the client plan, it's not billable. So that's how that kind of works, but yes.
So if it's not billable, it's not treated?
No, just means, it doesn't mean that it's not treated, it just means the provider that provides the services, that will provide that services and not get reimbursed.
So that could be a key thing that we could supplement.
And
Yeah,
so there
that
are
would be
things,
important.
right, so there are things that, you know, there are a lot of non-billable things we do every day because the clients need them. But Medi-Cal's not going to pay for that. That same, if you talk about a psychiatric hospitalization, you start talking cost. Medi-Cal only pays while you're acute. So the moment they've determined you're no longer acute, even if the psychiatrist thinks you should stay longer, that day is no longer billable. The county has to pay out realignment dollars. You cannot bill Medi-Cal for that day if the client stays past that day that they meet acuity.
Okay. And I think you begin to see historically, you know, in the past, what maybe have affected mental health services in the county and the funding and why, you know, maybe some things failed over the years is those first 2 items are very important to the county, to any facility, I guess, is what you're saying, to maintain a revenue source and a funding source.
And when you talk about psychiatric hospitalization, their document criteria is a little different. So while we need assessment and client plan for any of the outpatient services, when you go into inpatient, you still have to have an assessment. And you can go into inpatient with a diagnosis that qualifies, but if you go out with a diagnosis that doesn't qualify, that whole stay is denied. So it gets more difficult when you start looking at Medi-Cal and how we get refunded and paid for services and how we get that federal financial participation match. It's very complicated.
So in terms of what you just gave us, would all of these categories be potentially involved in a whatever kind of unit that might come under this, or some of them are?
So what you're looking at is a mix of outpatient mental health services, and then you have some what would be inpatient. So you're seeing both types of services. So there are inpatient services and outpatient services.
So there's, and on here, there would be some of these that would be under whatever facility we might be looking at that would be a potential inpatient facility, and some would not, is that?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay.
It'd be good to get everybody's
Do you have anything to report?
No.
No, I have nothing to report. Lord?
I don't have anything more.
I went and met with the Mendocino Coast Hospitality House board members Linnell Johnson and Jerry Thomas, their stakeholder, our community. I wanted to see what they felt the strongest need for mental health services were. And we talked about many, many, many different things, but I asked them to summarize what is most needed primarily. And they said affordable housing. And talked to the supervisor, they said affordable housing. So I never considered affordable housing as an issue for the mental health board, but I think, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, safety and security is the first and foremost thing that you need. So that's a complex problem that I don't know that we can fix, but that's something that we need to consider. And I was asking, what type of housing would we have, like a county-owned facility where people with mental health problems would go? And they said, no, absolutely not. You don't want to have that. You want to have small 5 to 6 unit places spread within the community. And I said, what's the second most important thing? And they mentioned a secure facility for the most sick individuals, because we don't have a place for them right now. So my plan, I want to try to meet with each stakeholder from our community and see what they think, outside of what, you know, Lee Kemper's doing that way. And I think that's what each of us can do. So we see what, you know, our stakeholders feel is important. And, you know, with all that information, we have the tools that we need to make tough choices.
Who was it that you got that information from? I didn't quite.
It's the Hospitality House board members. It was Linnell Johnson and Jerry Thomas. They're longtime board members there.
Gotcha.
Yep. And they do some mental health services.
Good. Thank you.
Yep.
Jed?
Kind of similar. I obviously met with the Willis City Council at previous meeting. Georgianne Krosky, who's the supervisor for the 3rd District, she also wanted to get more directly involved, and so she came to the City Council and spoke. And as I said, I'll be continuing to come to City Council meetings as requested. And I also told Supervisor Krosky that I'd be available to go to other parts of jurisdictions within the area, at least in 3rd District and wherever else I have time to go beyond, you know, being my volunteer job, and I have a regular job too. But there's obviously a lot of interest and a lot of support and a lot of, you know, dialogue that needs to happen. And so to the degree that, I agree with you, the more that we can get ourselves out in the community and not just be here, when I think we all are in our communities as well we were appointed. So that will continue.
Thank you. Shannon?
Anything to report?
All I have is I was forwarded the CCR Title IX state mandated mental health treatment services, and I forwarded it to Dora and she forwarded it to all of you. So that's your Title IX requirements, so that you have them.
Thank you. Is there any further public comment? Looks like we're at the end of the agenda. No, really. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.